Okay, in chapter 11, we're going to talk about how the nation, really begins to grow and prosper. And really, you can't talk about how this prosperity begins without talking about the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution. Okay? And what is the Industrial Revolution? Well, it is a very long, slow process. There's really no date. I can't tell you that on this date the Industrial Revolution began or when it ended. It was a long, slow process, and it changed the way the goods were produced. It's really starts with the new sources of power, water and steam. Now the economy begins to shift towards a manufactured-based economy. And it started somewhere in the mid-1700s. But up until that time, everybody made everything by hand. If you wanted a gun, you went to a gunsmith who handcrafted a gun for you. Each gun was different. You could, if you broke your trigger or your lock mechanism, you couldn't go back to the gunsmith and say, hey, I need a new one. He would have to actually probably make you a new, completely by hand made trigger. Okay, or possibly even a whole new gun. Same thing with clocks, same thing with everything was handmade. Okay? If you really want to talk about where the Industrial Revolution began, you have to look across the ocean to Great Britain. Now, the Industrial Revolution really starts with textiles or cloth. Up until this time, everybody spun cloth together. They would take cotton or wool or whatever they would make, and they would kind of rub it together or roll it together to create threads. These big long spools of thread. Okay? Then they would take the thread and then they would begin to weave it into cloth. This is a very long, a very slow process. And if you ever thought about it, a lot of people probably didn't have a lot of clothes. They probably had maybe one or two shirts, one or two pairs of pants. Women might have one or two dresses because, it's not like you can walk in and go, Mom, I need a new dress for the party. Or, hey, I tore a hole in my pants, I need a new pair of pants. Mom has to completely then go get some wool, spin it into thread, weave it into cloth. So this is a very long process, which means probably people didn't have a lot of clothes back then. Now, in about 1764, this dude, his name is James Hargreaves, he developed the spinning jenny. A spinning jenny is a machine that could spin multiple threads. Up until this time, you would actually take your cloth, your wool or your raw material, and spin it on a spinning wheel, and it would spin one big, huge thread. Okay, but the spinning jenny was able to spin several threads at once. Okay, so this is going to speed up the time it takes to turn that raw material into thread. So this is a very good invention, and it started in 1764. But even with the spinning jenny, you just still had a whole bunch of thread. It's faster, but you still had to weave it into cloth by hand. Well, in 1780s, a guy named Edmund Cartwright built a loom. A loom is a machine that basically weaves the cloth for you. And he powered this loom by water, by a water wheel. The wheel would be out into the water. As the river would flow by, he would turn the wheel, which would power the loom. So now it allowed workers to produce a great deal more cloth than they had possibly doing it by hand. So you start to see the use of a new power source, which is the water, to run a machine, which is the loom. Now with these new inventions of the spinning jenny and the powered loom, you start to see factory systems begin to develop. Up until this time, all the weaving had taken place mostly in homes. But with the invention of the loom, the spinning jenny, the water-powered wheels, you start to see factories develop. Okay? Okay, so, and it makes sense if you think about it. If you have this large piece of equipment, this large loom, this large spinning jenny, you're probably not going to be able to have it in your house. And you need to have it next to a water source, a river. So you start to see these factories, but factories aren't cheap. So what do you need to have? Well, first of all, you need to have capital. And capital means money. Money. You must have money. And where are you going to get that money? or you're going to get it from a guy named or a girl, but back then it's a guy, a capitalist. And the capitalist is a person who invests in a business in order to make a profit. So these guys would go to this rich guy and say, hey, listen, I have this great idea of this factory. And they tell the capitalist about the idea. The capitalist goes, hey, that sounds awesome. He invests his money because he knows that he is going to get profit. So whatever he invests, he invests a couple $1,000s, he might make that back plus more. So that's what a capitalist does. Even today, they take their own money, they risk their money. Maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not, but they risk their money in order to make a profit. And that's what they're doing back in the Industrial Revolution. They were finding people to invest in the business. Okay, so again, you start to see this factory system. And a factory system is the idea of having workers plus machinery together, and they produce goods in one place. So if you have your spinning jennies, you have your looms, and you have your workers in one place, you're producing cloth in one place. All right? There you go. That's the factory system. The other thing I should mention before we go on, though, is that these workers are going to be paid a flat rate, a wage, and they have to work a certain amount of hours a day, certain days a week. All right? And believe me, they were long days and many days in a row. All right? So I just want to make sure you remember that. The workers aren't going to make necessarily a profit off this. They're not going to be like the capitalists who could make a fortune. They are going to get paid a set wage, $1 a day, say. And that would probably have been a very good wage. So they're going to get paid a certain amount, and they have to work so many hours a day, so many days a week. Okay, the other thing we really need to talk about is interchangeable parts. Interchangeable parts, and this slide got a little messed up, is the idea that all parts are alike. The lock, stock, barrels, triggers, everything is alike. And we can thank an American named Eli Whitney who came up with this idea of interchangeable parts. And we have to look at, again, the musket or the gun. As I said earlier, guns are all made by hand, and each one of them is different. So if an army went out to the field or to war, and the guy breaks his gun, they have to give him a whole new gun. They can't just replace the part. So Eli Whitney says, something? It'd be great if we had this idea that we could take parts, make them exactly the same, and then we could interchange them, right? If a trigger breaks, we just put a new trigger in, the gun works the same. So he brings this idea to the government, because the government at the time, is buying lots of guns for the army, and they laugh at him. They go, oh my gosh, are you crazy? This will never work. So he takes these 10 guns, pieces for 10 guns, and he lays them out on the table. He puts all the locks, all the barrels, all the stocks, all the triggers, and he puts them all on the table. And then he assembles them all from different parts, and they all work. They all work. Takes them apart, puts them back together again in a different way. They all work. So this idea of interchangeable parts is going to do two things. First of all, if you break a piece, you don't have to buy a new gun. But it's also going to basically reduce the amount of cost for a gun. Now you can make thousands of triggers, thousands of barrels, thousands of stocks, instead of having to manufacture each one by hand. This is going to increase production and reduce costs. Great idea. And as this idea is going to spread to all kinds of different areas. To guns, of course, but to locks and clocks and all kinds of things where you can make all the pieces ahead of time and put them together and they work. All right? Finally, the last thing we need to talk about is an idea of urbanization. Urbanization. Okay? This is, we start to see for the first time in America, we're starting to shift away from farms towards the cities. And why the cities? To the factories. And I should also say this, the cities oftentimes followed the factory. In other words, what I'm saying is, if they build a factory, they probably need a blacksmith for the horses. People are riding their horses into the factory. And then they need a stable. And then people decide, it's too far to ride from my farm to the factory every day, so maybe I'm going to move to town. Well, I need now a house. Well, then I need a grocery store, and I need a theater, and I need a saloon, and I need all the other things that people need. All right? So cities begin to form, and often they form near the factories. Okay, now if you remember, I told you that the Industrial Revolution really starts in England. Now, England sees that if they can keep this secret, how they have produced their factory system, how they've produced looms, and how they produce the spinning jenny, if they could keep that as a national secret, they're going to have the monopoly on this. So Parliament passes a law. Nobody could take any plans for machines out of Britain. Can't do it. If you did, it's industrial espionage. It's treason, basically. But in 1789, a British guy named Samuel Slater leaves Great Britain for New York. But he did not take any plans with him. Or did he? Now, what he didn't actually take the actual physical plans. What he did is, the guy was obviously smart, he memorized the plans. Memorized them. How to build each piece of the loom and the spinning jenny. Amazing, all right? Okay, so he memorized it. He had heard, in America had been offering great rewards for anybody who could bring these plans to the United States, where we could build our own factory system. Now, Slater also knows that, customs officials, when they board ships, are searching luggage, searching things. So, like I said, he memorizes these plans. And he comes to New York, and he was able to, from memory, reconstruct all this machinery they need. So they are able to build the first successful textile mill powered by water in the United States. One other interesting fact I should tell you is that Slater's wife, who came with him, by the way, they moved this textile mill to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. There was actually a mill already there, but its machinery was not very good. The Americans weren't nearly as well versed in this as the British. Slater really, fixes all this equipment and makes it successful. But Slater's wife develops, and I'm not sure how she did this, but developed a way to make thread stronger so it doesn't snap in the spinning jennies. So this is a huge success, and it's the first successful textile mill is in actually Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Okay, there you have it. Okay, so let's talk about the Lowell Mills. Okay, remember the War of 1812. We just talked about that. Well, the War of 1812, Great Britain had cut off all its resources to America. So, America has to produce its own. So this really boosted American industry. If we can't get it from Great Britain, we're going to have to make it ourselves. So a guy named Francis Cabot Lowell looked at what Great Britain had been doing. Now, what Great Britain had been doing is they set up these factories, all right? And they would have one that had these huge spinning jennies where they would turn all the raw material into thread. Boom. They would then take all that thread to a second factory where they would then spin it into cloth. Well, Lowell says, you know something? Why don't we do everything in one factory? So, on one floor, they would take the raw material, spinning a thread, and then they'd take it to another part of the factory where they turn it into cloth. This speeds up and minimizes costs. All right? Now, after he died, by the way, this is in Massachusetts. All right? His partner built an entire factory town, which he calls Lowell, Massachusetts. And when this thing opened up, there was like 5 families that lived in the village. All right? By 1821, there's 100 families. And by 1836, 10,000 people lived in Lowell, Massachusetts. And most of the workers there were girls, called the Lowell girls. They were young women they hired to work in the mills. Now, at first, this turns out to be a really model factory town. Okay? At first, families aren't really enthusiastic about sending their girls away to work in this factory. Who was going to look after them? So the Lowell factory sets up all these rules. They have these neat little dormitories. The women have to go to church on Sunday. A lot of very, very strict rules. And families felt okay about sending their daughters to work there. Now, most of these women would work there, they would get their wages and send it back home to their families. And they would work there for several years till they would go back home and get married. And even though the hours are very long, it's stressful work, it can be dangerous work too, it was pretty successful. All right? And women, for the first time, they're able to feel, like, hey, I'm a productive member of society. I'm actually out there earning my keep, producing something and earning a wage. So a lot of women feel good about this. Unfortunately, though, this whole model factory town of Lowell is not going to follow in other parts. Okay? So the Lowell Mill was often called a model factory town. Okay? And it's mostly run by the Lowell girls. Now, I told you that Lowell hired mostly women. And why did they hire women and children? Well, follow the money. All right? They hired women and children because they could pay them half of what they had to pay men. All right? So although women are working and they're earning a wage, they are not going to be paid equally. They're going to get half of what a man would make. All right? And they'd hire children, as young as 7 sometimes, to work in these factories. And you know why they hired children a lot of times? First of all, they can pay them less, but also because their hands are small and their arms are tiny, and they can get in between this complicated machinery to free obstructions, free binds and jams. Very dangerous. Many children lose their hands, their limbs, their arms. Some are killed. There's nobody looking out for the welfare of these children. There's no OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Agency. It's up to the individual factory owners about how well they take care of their workers. And many times they could care less. There's dozens of kids, dozens of women who would take these jobs. So if there's even a story about this one woman who, she was working, there's a bind, she has to go in there to clean it out. She ends up getting a finger cut off. Did they say, oh my God, no, they told her, get back to work. You're not going to die. Wow, harsh. Okay? It was very long hours. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. All right? You get Sunday off. And what are you doing on Sunday? You're going to church. All right? So very little time off. Now, oftentimes, whole families left work to go, work in these factories, left home. Now think about this, 12 hours a day. So you probably have to be at the factory, let's say 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, that poor mom had to get up, probably prepare breakfast, get the family all out the door, have to get to the factory. She works 12 hours that day. Then everybody, Mom, we're hungry. What's for dinner? All right? So now poor mom is tired and exhausted. Now she's cooking her food. And by the way, you're not going to the store to buy groceries like, hey, get a loaf of bread. No, mom's having to make the bread from scratch. It is terribly difficult for women, especially back then, especially the mother. All right? And like I said, in the early times, especially, at the beginning of the Lowell factory, that model factory, conditions were much better in America than they were in Europe. But as the factory system begins to grow and greed begins to take over, you see that the welfare of the workers becomes less important, way less important. They are just a commodity. We can get dozens of workers. So there's no labor unions, by the way. So nobody's looking out for the welfare of these. But like I told you before, these factories help cities begin to grow. But with it comes some side effects. All right? There's no sewers in these cities, trash in the street, disease. They were muddy, they were smoky, they were filthy. Many children and families would become sick just from the conditions of being so closely together with other sick people. So there's some bad side of these cities growing up around these factories. Some things that were good, though, is that, we started to see some culture begin to arrive to some of these people. Theaters begin to spring up, museums, um, some stores that would bring in imported items from Europe. So you start to see, even though there's a lot of negatives about these cities, there are some positives also. Um, you start to see China and silk and some things that these people have probably never had an opportunity to see. Traveling magicians, musicians, theater acts. So, with these factory system comes both good and bad. So there you have it. That's the Industrial Revolution. The time when, we begin to start to shift away from just that farming economy towards the manufacturing economy. All right? Let's talk to you next time.